The crosshairs settled on the Taliban fighter's chest, just as Marcus Webb's radio crackled with a voice he had not heard in 18 months. Staff Sergeant Chun was screaming coordinates into the net, his words clipped with the kind of panic that came from watching your entire world collapse around you. 22 Rangers trapped in a valley that had become a killing box, and Webb was watching it happen from a rooftop 3 kilometers away through a scope he had no authorization to be holding. He adjusted for wind. The Taliban fighter below was setting up a PKM machine gun with a clear line of fire into the valley where the Rangers were pinned. Webb's finger rested on the trigger of a rifle that did not belong to him, worn by hands that had been declared unworthy of holding any weapon in service to his country. 18 months ago, those same Rangers had sat in a courtroom at Bagram and watched him get stripped of everything he had earned over 12 years. Dishonorable discharge. Loss of all benefits. The word traitor attached to his name in official records. Major Ryan Dutton had made sure of that, spinning a story about Webb abandoning his position, about compromised operations and suspected collaboration with enemy forces. All lies, all carefully constructed to cover Dutton's own catastrophic mistake that had gotten 6 men killed. But Webb had been the convenient scapegoat. A quiet sniper from rural Montana with no family connections, no political allies, and a stubborn refusal to play the games that greased the wheels of military politics. When Dutton needed someone to blame, Webb had been the perfect target. The radio chatter intensified. Chun was calling for air support that would not arrive in time. The quick reaction force was still 15 minutes out. In a firefight, 15 minutes was a lifetime. Webb had seen enough combat to know exactly how this would end if someone did not intervene. He had returned to Afghanistan 3 months ago as a civilian contractor, the only work he could find that did not require him to explain the scarlet letter on his discharge papers. Security consultant, they called it. Glorified gate guard was more accurate. He pulled 12-hour shifts checking IDs and searching vehicles at FOB Mitchell's main entrance, avoided eye contact with anyone in uniform, and tried not to think about the fact that he had once been one of the best snipers in the entire theater of operations. The stray dog appeared at the edge of his peripheral vision, the same mangy creature that had been hanging around the base for weeks. Ribs showing through matted fur, one ear torn from some past fight, limping on a back leg that had healed wrong. The other contractors kicked at it when it got too close. Webb had started leaving half his breakfast near the fence line every morning. The dog never came close enough to touch, but it always showed up, watching him with eyes that understood rejection. Webb reached into his pocket, pulled out the protein bar he had saved from lunch, and tossed it toward the animal. The dog snatched it and disappeared into the shadows between the buildings. Small acts of mercy were all Webb had left to prove he was still human. The Taliban fighter below finished setting up the machine gun and signaled to his companions. Webb could see the ambush unfolding with the clarity that came from hundreds of combat operations. The Rangers were being herded into a choke point where that PKM would cut them down like wheat before a scythe. He recognized the tactical pattern, had seen it executed a dozen times in these mountains. Whoever was running the Taliban operation knew exactly what they were doing. Webb's radio crackled again. This time it was Major Dutton's voice, smooth and confident as always, assuring higher command that the situation was under control. The same voice that had testified under oath about Webb's supposed failures. The same voice that had never wavered, never shown a hint of doubt while destroying a man's entire life to protect his own career. The rage that Webb had carefully controlled for 18 months threatened to break through. He could walk away. Let Dutton's mistakes finally catch up with him. Let the Rangers who had sat silent during the court-martial face the consequences of their cowardice. Webb owed them nothing, less than nothing. But then Chin's voice came through again, younger and more frightened than Webb had ever heard it. Behind the tactical jargon was a 20-year-old sergeant with a wife and 2 kids back in Virginia, a man who had stood in that courtroom and said nothing when one word of truth could have changed everything. Webb's finger remained on the trigger. The Taliban fighter was giving orders now, directing others into position. In 30 seconds, the ambush would be set. In 60 seconds, it would be sprung. In 90 seconds, at least a dozen Rangers would be dead. The moral calculus was simple and terrible. Webb could save the men who had thrown him away, or he could let justice run its course. He could be the bigger man, or he could be human. He could prove Dutton wrong about him, or he could prove Dutton right. Before we go further into what Marcus Webb decided in that impossible moment, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you are from, or know someone who faced an impossible choice between revenge and redemption. Webb made his choice. The rifle barked once, a sound swallowed by the mountain wind, and 3 kilometers away the Taliban fighter dropped before his finger reached his own trigger. The second shot followed 3 seconds later, dropping another fighter who had been moving toward the machine gun position. Webb worked the bolt with muscle memory that 18 months away from the rifle had not erased. Third shot. Fourth. Each one precisely placed, each one buying the trapped Rangers another few seconds of life. Through the scope, he watched Chun and the others react to the sudden collapse of the ambush forming around them. Confusion first, then the trained response of men who understood that someone was providing overwatch. They began moving, using the brief window to reposition toward cover that would give them a fighting chance. Webb's hands were steady. That had always been his gift, the thing that separated good snipers from great ones. Other men struggled with adrenaline, with the shake that came from knowing you held another human life at the end of your crosshairs. Webb had never struggled. His heart rate actually dropped when he looked through a scope, his breathing naturally slowed, and the world contracted to nothing but wind, distance, and the physics of the shot. It was why Dutton's accusations had been so absurd to anyone who actually knew Webb. Abandoning his position, the court-martial had claimed, compromising the mission through negligence. The real story was simpler and uglier. Dutton had ordered an assault on a compound that Webb's reconnaissance had identified as a trap. Webb had reported it up the chain, had provided photographic evidence of the tactical setup, had recommended an alternative approach. Dutton had ignored him. The major wanted a quick victory, wanted the kind of combat action that looked good in a fitness report. So he had sent 2 squads into a prepared kill zone, and 6 men had died in the first 30 seconds. 6 men who should still be alive. Someone had to take the blame. A deadened sniper with no political connections was infinitely more expendable than a major from a military family, a man whose father was a colonel and whose uncle sat on a Senate oversight committee. The investigation had been concluded before it began. Evidence disappeared. Radio logs were edited. Witnesses developed convenient memory problems. The only man who could have corroborated Webb's account had been Sergeant First Class Martinez, the team leader who had been on the ground during the assault. Martinez had taken 3 rounds to the chest and had died calling for a medic that never arrived in time. With Martinez gone, it was Webb's word against the majors, and the outcome had been inevitable. Webb had sat through the court-martial in silence, watching men he had served with for years avoid his eyes. He had listened to Dutton describe him as unreliable, emotionally unstable, potentially compromised by local contacts. He had heard a JAG officer who had never seen combat question his dedication to the mission. And when the verdict came down, he had stood at attention and accepted it without a word. His mother had died while he was in basic training. His father had been gone since Webb was 6. There was no family to call, no home to return to. The army had been everything. And in one morning, it had been taken away. The rifle barked again. Another Taliban fighter fell. Webb was running the calculations automatically now, tracking not just the immediate threats but the second and third order effects of each shot. Every fighter he dropped changed the tactical equation, shifted the pressure, created opportunities for the Rangers to exploit. Chen's voice came through the radio again, calmer now. He was directing his men with the confidence of someone who understood that the odds had shifted. Webb recognized the moment, had seen it countless times. That instant when trapped men realized they might actually survive, when desperation transformed into determination. A new voice cut through the radio chatter. Major Dutton, demanding a situation report. Webb could picture him in the Tactical Operations Center, surrounded by screens and subordinates, orchestrating the response from climate-controlled safety. Dutton had not been outside the wire in 6 months. He commanded from a distance, made decisions about men's lives while drinking coffee and checking email. Chin reported the enemy contact decreasing, his confusion evident. He could not identify where the fire was coming from that was dismantling the ambush. No air support had arrived. No artillery had been called in. Someone was out there in the mountains, systematically removing threats, and Chun had no idea who. Dutton ordered him to hold position and wait for the quick reaction force. Standard procedure. Safe procedure. The kind of decision that looked correct in an after-action report. It was also exactly wrong for the tactical situation. Webb could see what Chun could not, that holding position would allow the Taliban to regroup and reinforce. The window for movement was closing. Webb switched to the emergency frequency, the open channel that anyone with a radio could access. He keyed the mic and spoke for the first time, his voice low and calm. "Move northeast," he said. 200 meters to the wadi. Follow it north. Avoid the trail. The radio went silent. Then Chin's voice, hesitant and confused. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows these mountains," Webb replied. "Someone who wants you to live. Move now." He could hear Dutton in the background, demanding to know who was on the channel, ordering Chun to maintain position. But Chun was a veteran of too many firefights to ignore good tactical advice when he heard it. Webb listened as Chun gave orders to his men, heard them begin to move. The Taliban responded exactly as Webb had predicted, shifting to intercept along the trail. Webb was already tracking them, already adjusting for the new firing solutions. The rifle spoke again and again, each shot removing a piece from the board, each elimination creating more space for the Rangers to maneuver. Dutton's voice rose in volume and anger. He was ordering Chun to identify the source of the unauthorized communications. He was threatening disciplinary action. He was doing everything except acknowledging that someone had just prevented 22 men from being slaughtered in a valley that Dutton's own poor planning had trapped them in. Webb ignored him. The Rangers were moving well now, using proper spacing and covering each other's movement. Chin was good at his job, had always been good at his job. He had just been weak when it mattered most. Weak and scared and probably threatened, because that was how Dutton operated. The Major collected leverage on people, found their pressure points, and squeezed when he needed something. Through the scope, Webb watched the Rangers reach the wadi and disappear into the natural cover. The Taliban were pulling back now, regrouping, trying to understand what had gone wrong with their carefully planned ambush. In another few minutes, the quick reaction force would arrive, and the immediate danger would be over. Webb's radio crackled one more time. Chin's voice, quieter now, almost personal. "Unknown station. We are clear of immediate contact. I do not know who you are, but thank you." Webb did not respond. He safed the rifle, checked the area one final time through the scope, and began breaking down the position. In 10 minutes, this rooftop would be swarming with personnel trying to identify who had been here. In 15 minutes, Dutton would be demanding an investigation. But for now, 22 Rangers were alive who had no right to expect it. And Marcus Webb had proven something to himself that he had begun to doubt during the long months of exile and disgrace. He was still the man he had always been, regardless of what any court-martial said. The uniform did not make the soldier. The rank did not create the character. And throwing someone away did not erase what they were capable of. It was, Webb reflected as he climbed down from the roof, a very bad move on Dutton's part, because now the Major had a problem he did not know existed, and Webb had just discovered he still had something worth fighting for. Webb made it halfway across the base before the military police found him. 2 privates in full kit, hands resting on their sidearms, blocking the path between the contractor barracks and the motor pool. Behind them stood Captain Morrison from the Provost Marshal's office, a man Webb had never spoken to, but whose reputation for following orders without question preceded him. The rifle was still broken down in Webb's pack. He had wiped it clean, removed any trace of propellant residue from his hands, and changed his shirt. But Morrison was looking at him with the expression of a man who already knew the answer and was just going through the formality of asking the question. Where were you for the last hour? Morrison said. It was not really a question. My rack, Webb replied. Sleeping. I worked the night shift on the gate. Morrison glanced at a tablet in his hand. According to the gate log, you signed out at 0800. That was 4 hours ago. Webb shrugged. Went for a run. Got chow. Came back. Anyone see you? Probably. It is a small base. Morrison did not look convinced, but he also did not look particularly invested in pushing harder. He was a checkbox officer, the kind who made sure the investigation happened without caring much about the results. Major Dutton wants to speak with you, Morrison said. Now, Webb felt something cold settle in his chest. Of course Dutton wanted to speak with him. The Major was many things, but stupid was not one of them. He would have reviewed the tactical situation, analyzed the shot patterns, and reached the obvious conclusion that only someone with elite sniper training could have executed that kind of precision fire at that distance. And there was exactly one person on FOB Mitchell with that training who had every reason to want to interfere with Dutton's operations. Webb followed Morrison across the base, the two privates falling in behind them like an honor guard. Other soldiers stopped to watch, their expressions curious. Contractors did not usually get escorted by MPs. Whatever was happening was unusual enough to draw attention. The Tactical Operations Center was housed in a reinforced building near the center of the base, air-conditioned and humming with electronics. Dutton stood near a wall of screens showing various feeds from around the area of operations. He turned when Webb entered, and for just a moment something flickered across his face. Recognition, calculation, and underneath it all, fear. Mr. Webb, Dutton said, making the civilian title sound like an insult. Thank you for joining us. I'm trying to understand something about today's engagement. Webb said nothing. He had learned during the court-martial that silence was sometimes the best defense. Let Dutton talk. Let him show his cards. 22 Rangers were extracted from a hostile situation this morning, Dutton continued. During that extraction, approximately 15 enemy combatants were eliminated by an unknown sniper. Long-range precision fire. Extremely high level of skill. He paused, watching Webb's face. Any thoughts on who might have provided that support? Air assets, Webb suggested. Predator drone, maybe. Dutton smiled without humor. No air assets were in the area. I checked. He moved closer, his voice dropping. So I started thinking about who on this base has that level of training. Who knows those mountains? Who might have access to a rifle and a high position with line of sight to that valley? Still, Webb said nothing. And then I thought, Dutton said, who on this base has a personal grudge? Who might want to make me look incompetent by stepping in when I had the situation under control? The situation where 22 Rangers were about to die, Webb said quietly. The situation that was being handled through proper channels and command authority, Dutton snapped. His composure cracked for just a second, revealing the anger underneath. You do not get to play hero, Webb. You're not a soldier anymore. You're a contractor. You check IDs at a gate. That is all you are qualified to do. I saved 22 lives. You interfered with a military operation without authorization. You used a weapon you have no right to possess. You transmitted on military frequencies. Dutton's voice rose. You are lucky I do not have you arrested right now. Webb met his eyes. Do it then. Call the MPs. Charge me. Put it all in the official record. Explain to the investigators why those Rangers needed an unauthorized sniper to save them from an ambush they should never have been in. The silence stretched between them. Morrison shifted uncomfortably near the door. One of the intelligence analysts at a nearby workstation was pretending very hard not to listen. Dutton understood the trap. Any official investigation would require him to explain the tactical decisions that had led to the Rangers being isolated and vulnerable. It would shine light on his command choices, his risk assessment, his failure to properly recon the area before sending men into it. The same pattern of poor judgment that had gotten 6 men killed 18 months ago. You are confined to base, Dutton said finally. You do not leave FOB Mitchell without my explicit authorization. You do not touch a weapon. You do not communicate with any active duty personnel. And if I find out you interfere with operations again, I will have you on the first flight back to the States in zip cuffs. Are we clear? Webb nodded slowly. Crystal clear, Major. Get out. Webb turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back at Dutton, who was already turning back to his screens, already dismissing the contractor who had just exposed his incompetence. One more thing, Webb said. Dutton did not turn around. What? Those men are alive because someone with actual tactical knowledge made decisions you were incapable of making. You can confine me to base. You can threaten me with arrest. But you cannot change the fact that you are a danger to every soldier under your command. Webb let that hang in the air for a moment, and eventually, someone besides me is going to notice. He walked out before Dutton could respond, Morrison and the MPs trailing behind him. The afternoon sun hit him as he exited the building, bright and hot after the artificial coolness of the operations center. Chun was waiting near the corner of the building, still in his combat gear, dust and cordite staining his uniform. He pushed off the wall when he saw Webb, his expression uncertain. It was you, Chin said. Not a question, a statement. Webb kept walking. I do not know what you are talking about. Chin fell in a step beside him. Those shots, that radio call, the tactical read on the valley. He shook his head. No one else on this base can shoot like that. You should get back to your unit, Sergeant. I need to say something. Chin's voice was tight with emotion. What happened to you? Epigram. The court-martial. His words came faster now, tumbling out. Dutton threatened my family. Said if I testified for you, he would make sure my wife's security clearance was revoked. She works for the State Department. Without that clearance, she loses her job. We lose our house. Everything. Webb stopped walking. He turned to face Chun, seeing the guilt written across the younger man's features. I understand, he said simply. I am sorry. Chun looked like he might be sick. I have thought about it every day since. What I should have said, how I should have stood up. But I was scared and I was weak, and I let you take the fall for something you did not do. Webb studied him for a long moment. Chun was 28 years old with a wife and 2 daughters he Skyped with every night. A good soldier who had been put in an impossible position by a corrupt officer. Hate was easy. Forgiveness was harder. But Webb found he did not have the energy for hate anymore. You have a family to protect, Webb said. I do not. You made the choice you had to make. That does not make it right. No, but makes it human. Webb started walking again. Go take care of your men, Sergeant. Make sure they are ready for whatever comes next. Because something is coming, Chin said. Dutton is going to retaliate. You embarrassed him today. Let him try, Webb said. I have already lost everything that matters. What else can he take? But even as he said it, walking back toward the contractor barracks with the weight of the day settling onto his shoulders, Webb knew it was not quite true. He had found something today that he thought was gone forever. Purpose. The knowledge that his skills still mattered, that he could still make a difference even without the uniform. Dutton had thrown him away, thinking he was removing a problem. Instead, he had created something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and every reason to fight back. The Taliban were not the only enemy on FOB Mitchell, and the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, Webb woke to find his contractor ID had been deactivated. The gate guard who delivered the news looked embarrassed, avoiding Webb's eyes as he explained that all access privileges had been suspended pending review. Webb was effectively confined to the small cluster of buildings that housed civilian personnel, cut off from the rest of the base. He spent the morning sitting outside the barracks, watching the patterns of military life continue without him. Convoys rolling out, patrols returning, helicopters lifting off and landing in clouds of dust. The rhythm of war carried on, indifferent to one man's exile within an exile. The stray dog appeared around noon, limping across the open ground with that familiar cautious approach. Webb pulled out the energy bar he had saved from breakfast and tossed it. The dog caught it midair this time, a small sign of growing trust. It settled in the shade 10 feet away, close enough to watch Webb, but still ready to run. You and me both, Webb said quietly. Neither one of us belongs here anymore. Footsteps approached from behind. Webb turned to find Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo from the intelligence section, a tablet tucked under one arm, and an expression of intense focus on her face. She was young, maybe 26, with the kind of idealism that had not yet been ground down by the military bureaucracy. Webb had seen her around the base, but had never spoken to her. "Mr. Webb," she said, "may I sit? It is a free country." "Well, free-ish." She settled onto the bench beside him, placing the tablet carefully on her lap. "I have been reviewing the after-action reports from yesterday's engagement." Her voice was careful, professional. "The shot patterns are remarkable. 15 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Wind conditions variable. Multiple moving targets." She turned to look at him. "Whoever made those shots is operating at a level I have only seen documented in special operations files." Webb said nothing, watching the dog instead. "I also reviewed your service record," Okonkwo continued. "Before your discharge, 347 confirmed kills over 4 deployments. 2 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star. You were one of the most effective snipers in theater." That was before, Webb said flatly. "I spoke with some of the Rangers who were extracted yesterday." Off the record, Okonkwo's voice dropped lower. "Sergeant Shun told me an interesting story about threats made against his family, about evidence that disappeared from the court-martial files, about a major who needed a scapegoat to cover his own mistakes." Webb turned to face her. "Why are you telling me this, Lieutenant?" "Because I have been stationed at FOB Mitchell for 3 months, and in that time I have watched Major Dutton make decisions that do not make tactical sense." She opened the tablet, swiping through documents. 2 weeks ago, he ordered a patrol into an area that intelligence had flagged as high risk without proper air support. They took casualties. Last month, he diverted resources from a confirmed high-value target to pursue a lead that I told him was unreliable. We lost the target. Sounds like incompetence. It sounds like a pattern. Okonkwo pulled up a file, turning the screen so Webb could see. "And then I started digging into the original court-martial. The one that got you discharged." Webb's jaw tightened. "I would not recommend that, Lieutenant. Dutton does not appreciate people questioning his decisions. I am an intelligence officer, Mr. Webb. Questioning things is literally my job." She scrolled through what appeared to be classified documents. "The official investigation into the Helmand Province incident concluded that you abandoned your overwatch position and failed to provide covering fire during the assault. 6 men died. That is what the report says. But the radio logs do not match the timeline." She highlighted sections of text. "You called in warnings about the compound being a trap 45 minutes before the assault. You provided photographic reconnaissance showing enemy positions. You recommended an alternative approach." All of that was in the original logs. Was being the operative word. Okonkwo nodded slowly. "The logs submitted as evidence had those transmissions edited out. I found the original versions buried in the backup server. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like you failed to communicate critical intelligence. Let me guess who had access to edit those logs. Major Dutton was the investigating officer. He had full access." She closed the tablet. "Mr. Webb, I think you were set up. I think 6 men died because of Dutton's bad call, and he used his authority to pin it on you." Webb had known this for 18 months. Hearing someone else say it, someone with actual rank and authority, hit differently than he expected. "Welcome to my world, Lieutenant. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I do not know yet." Okonkwo's idealism showed through in her voice. "But it is not right. You served honorably, and you were destroyed to protect a coward. That is not why I joined the Army." Before Webb could respond, shouting erupted from across the base. Both of them stood, looking toward the operations center where a cluster of officers had gathered. Even from a distance, Webb could see the tension in their body language. Chin appeared, jogging toward them with his rifle slung across his chest. His face was tight with worry. "We have a problem," he said. 3 listening posts just went dark. No radio contact. No visual confirmation. Dutton's response, Webb asked. Chin glanced at Okonkwo, then back to Webb. "He is organizing a patrol to check on them. Full platoon. Wants them to roll out in 30 minutes. Webb felt ice form in his stomach. "What is the tactical picture?" Chin hesitated. "Intelligence says Taliban activity has increased in that sector. Multiple sightings of armed groups moving through the area. So Dutton wants to send a full platoon into an area with confirmed enemy activity to check on listening posts that are probably already overrun. Webb looked at Okonkwo. Tell me that is not the same kind of thinking that got 6 men killed in Helmand. Okonkwo was already pulling up maps on her tablet. The listening posts are here, here, and here. She pointed to positions on the digital terrain, all within a 3-kilometer radius. If they are coordinating, if this is a deliberate attack, then sending a relief force into that area without proper reconnaissance is walking into exactly the kind of trap I briefed against this morning. Did Dutton read your brief? Webb asked. He dismissed it, said I was being overly cautious. Of course he did. Webb stood, his mind already running through the tactical situation. How long until the patrol leaves? 25 minutes now, Chin said. Webb looked at both of them. I need to get to high ground. I need line of sight to those listening post positions. You are confined to this area, Okonkwo said. If you leave, Dutton will have you arrested. If I do not leave, 30 men might drive into a kill box. Webb started walking toward the perimeter. The stray dog stood up, watching him with those intelligent eyes. Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what is right. Mr. Webb, Okonkwo called after him. I did not see you leave. Chin smiled grimly. Me neither. Webb reached the fence line and found a section he had noticed weeks ago where the wire did not quite meet the ground. Contractor work poorly supervised. He slipped through, the dog following close behind for the first time since they had met. Together, they disappeared into the rocky terrain beyond the base perimeter, moving toward the high ground that would give Webb the view he needed. Behind them, the sound of diesel engines starting carried across the afternoon air. The patrol was preparing to roll out. Major Dutton was about to make the same mistake again, sending good soldiers into danger because his pride would not allow him to listen to warnings. But this time, Webb was not going to sit silent while men died. This time, he had nothing left to lose and every reason to fight back. Dutton had thought throwing him away would solve the problem. He was about to discover just how badly he had miscalculated. Webb reached the ridgeline and began setting up his position, the dog settling into the rocks beside him like it understood exactly what was about to happen. The real war was not against the Taliban anymore. It was against the enemy wearing the same uniform, hiding behind rank and authority while good soldiers paid the price for his incompetence. And Webb intended to win. Webb reached the observation point just as the patrol's lead vehicle cleared the base perimeter. Through his scope, he could see the full tactical picture that Dutton either could not or would not acknowledge. The 3 listening posts formed a triangle, and at the center of that triangle was a dried riverbed that offered the only practical route for vehicles. Classic ambush geometry. The dog settled beside him in the rocks, panting quietly. Webb had tried to leave it behind, but the animal had followed, keeping pace through the rough terrain with a determination that matched his own. Now it lay watching him with those knowing eyes, as if understanding that something important was about to happen. Webb keyed his stolen radio to the patrol frequency. Actual, this is Overwatch. You are driving into a prepared ambush. Recommend you abort and return to base. Static, then Dutton's voice, tight with anger. This frequency is restricted to authorized personnel. Identify yourself immediately. The lead vehicle was 2 kilometers from the kill zone now. Webb could see movement in the rocks above the dried riverbed, the telltale signs of fighters getting into position. At least 20 of them, maybe more. RPGs and heavy machine guns. The patrol would be shredded in the first 30 seconds. Actual, Webb transmitted again, you have approximately 20 enemy fighters dug in along grid November Whiskey 3714. They have been waiting for you. This is a trap. All units. Dutton's voice came back. Ignore unauthorized transmissions. Continue mission as briefed. Webb watched through the scope as the patrol continued forward. The lead vehicle commander was looking uncertain, his head on a swivel, clearly picking up on the same tactical indicators that Webb was seeing. But orders were orders, and Dutton was not backing down. The patrol was 90 seconds from contact now. Webb began ranging targets, identifying the most dangerous threats. The RPG teams first, then the machine gun positions. He could probably drop 8, maybe 10 enemy fighters before they realized where the fire was coming from. It would not be enough to stop the ambush, but it might be enough to let the patrol retreat. His radio crackled again, this time on a different frequency. "Overwatch, this is Yankee 16. Sergeant Chin's voice, quiet and deliberate. I am lead vehicle commander. Give me tactical read." Webb felt something shift in his chest. Chun was trusting him, putting his life and the lives of his men in the hands of the man his testimony had helped destroy. "RPG team at your 11 o'clock, 500 meters. Heavy gun at your 2 o'clock, 700 meters. You are driving into a shaped ambush. When shooting starts, reverse immediately and use smoke." Chin did not respond, but Webb saw the lead vehicle slow slightly. The driver was being briefed, getting ready to execute emergency maneuvers. Dutton's voice exploded over the command frequency. "Yankee 16, maintain course and speed." That is a direct order. Webb could see Chun in the turret of the lead vehicle, could imagine the decision point he was facing. Follow orders and drive into the ambush, or trust the disgraced sniper and potentially face court-martial for disobeying a direct command. The patrol was 60 seconds from contact. Chun made his choice. "All Yankee units, halt." His voice was steady. "Actual, Yankee 16. I have visual confirmation of enemy positions. Recommend we withdraw and call for air support." "Negative," Dutton shot back. "You will continue mission. That listening post needs verification." "Actual, with respect, that listening post is already lost. I can see bodies from here." Webb could hear the lie in Chin's voice, the tactical deception. "We are outgunned and outpositioned. Requesting permission to withdraw." "Permission denied. Continue to objective." Webb watched the Taliban fighters shift in their positions, getting ready. They had heard the vehicle's halt, knew something was wrong. The ambush was about to be sprung whether the patrol drove in or not. "Chun," Webb transmitted on the private frequency, "they're about to open fire. Get your people turned around now." Chin started giving orders, his voice calm but urgent. "All units, prepare to execute bounding withdrawal. Smoke on my mark." The first RPG launched before the smoke canisters hit the ground. Webb's rifle barked in response, and the RPG gunner dropped before he could reload. Second shot, third shot, machine gunner down, another RPG team eliminated. He was working on instinct now, years of training taking over, each target prioritized and eliminated with mechanical precision. The patrol was reversing, vehicles throwing up plumes of dust and smoke. Taliban fighters were pouring fire into the area, but Webb's intervention had disrupted their timing. What should have been a coordinated slaughter had turned into chaos. Webb's radio erupted with crosstalk. Dutton demanding situation reports. Chun calling out targets. The other vehicle commanders coordinating their withdrawal. And underneath it all, the sound of men under fire, the crack of rounds impacting armor, the shouted warnings of incoming threats. Webb eliminated another RPG team, then shifted to a machine gunner who was getting too effective against the retreating vehicles. The dog pressed closer to him, trembling at the sound of gunfire, but refusing to run. Something about that loyalty, that stubborn refusal to abandon him, made Webb's throat tight. The last vehicle cleared the kill zone. Chun was counting heads, making sure everyone made it out. Webb continued firing, keeping the Taliban suppressed, giving the patrol the time they needed to get to safety. Then his radio crackled with a new voice. "Lieutenant Okonkwo, urgent and frightened. Overwatch, be advised. Dutton has dispatched MPs to your last known position. They have authorization to use force." Webb cursed under his breath. Of course Dutton had. The major could not afford to let Webb continue exposing his incompetence. Better to silence the problem permanently than admit he had been wrong. Through his scope, Webb could see the patrol reaching safe distance, the vehicles forming up in a defensive position. All personnel accounted for. 0 casualties. Mission accomplished, even if not the way Dutton had planned it. Webb broke down his position quickly, shouldering his pack and the rifle. The dog stood up, ready to move. "Time to go," Webb said. But where? He was outside the wire, on foot, with military police hunting him and Taliban fighters between him and the base. His tactical options were narrowing by the second. His radio crackled one more time. Chen's voice, barely audible. Overwatch, there's a maintenance shed at Grid November Whiskey 3 at 612. We use it for vehicle recovery. It has supplies. Water. Medical. He paused. And it is not on any official maps. Dutton does not know it exists. Webb checked his map, calculated the distance. 2 kilometers south, through terrain that would provide good concealment. Copy, he transmitted. Thanks. Webb, Chen's voice came back, softer now. What you did today. What you have been doing. His voice cracked slightly. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Just keep your men alive, Sergeant. That is payment enough. Webb started moving, the dog following close at his heels. Behind him, he could hear vehicles approaching his former position, MPs fanning out to search for a ghost. Dutton would be furious when they came up empty, would probably order a full base lockdown. But Webb was already gone, moving through the mountains with the same skills that had made him one of the most effective snipers in theater. The difference now was that he was not hunting Taliban. He was fighting a different kind of war, one that required different tactics. Dutton had thrown him away, had tried to bury him and forget he existed. But Webb kept coming back, kept interfering, kept saving the lives of soldiers that Dutton's incompetence put at risk. And with each intervention, with each impossible shot, with each life saved, Webb was building something more dangerous than Dutton understood. He was building a reputation, a legend. The ghost sniper who protected soldiers from the shadows, who defied authority to do what was right, who refused to stay buried no matter how hard they tried to keep him down. Webb reached the maintenance shed as the sun began to set, the dog limping beside him. Inside he found exactly what Chen had promised. Supplies, water, a cot, and most importantly, a safe place to rest while he figured out his next move. He poured water into a bowl for the dog, who drank gratefully before settling onto the floor near the cot. Webb sat down heavily, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Through the small window, he could see FOB Mitchell in the distance, lights coming on as darkness fell. Somewhere in that base, Dutton was planning his next move. Somewhere, Chun and the Rangers were telling stories about the mysterious shooter who kept saving their lives. Somewhere, Okonkwo was digging deeper into files that would eventually expose the truth. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 18 months, Webb felt like he was fighting back instead of just surviving. Dutton had made a critical mistake when he threw Webb away. He had assumed that taking away the uniform would take away the soldier. He had been catastrophically wrong. Webb woke to the sound of a helicopter passing overhead, the distinctive thump of rotors cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. He remained still, listening as the aircraft circled the area twice before moving on. Search pattern. Dutton was expanding the hunt beyond the immediate perimeter. The dog lifted its head, ears perked but stayed quiet. Over the past 12 hours the animal had proven remarkably disciplined, as if it understood the need for stealth. Webb scratched behind its mangled ear, earning a brief tail wag. His radio crackled to life. Okonkwo's voice, barely above a whisper. Overwatch, are you receiving? Webb keyed the mic. I am here. I have something you need to know. Her voice was tight with suppressed excitement. I have been going through the archived files from your court-martial, the ones buried in the backup servers, and I found something that changes everything. Webb sat up, fully alert now. What did you find? The investigation file has a classified annex, something that was never presented at your trial. Okonkwo paused. It is a series of communications between Major Dutton and his father, Colonel Brendan Dutton, who was stationed at CENTCOM headquarters at the time. Webb felt his pulse quicken. Keep talking. The messages start 2 days after the Hellman incident. Major Dutton tells his father that there was a catastrophic failure during an assault, that 6 men are dead, that an investigation is being opened. She took a breath, and then his father writes back with very specific instructions on how to handle it. Instructions to frame me. Instructions to identify a suitable alternative explanation for the failure. To secure testimony from personnel who could be influenced. To ensure that radio logs and other evidence supported the alternative narrative. Okonkwo's voice hardened. Mr. Webb, this was not just Major Dutton covering his mistakes. This was a coordinated effort involving a senior officer at CENTCOM to obstruct justice and destroy an innocent soldier's career. Webb closed his eyes, 18 months of anger and betrayal crystallizing into something cold and focused. Can you prove it? The communications are authenticated. They carry official headers and encryption signatures. She hesitated. But they're also classified at a level that I should not have access to. If I bring this forward, I could face charges myself for unauthorized access to classified materials. Then do not bring it forward yet. Webb was already thinking tactically, planning several moves ahead. We need more than just the communications. We need witnesses willing to testify. We need the original evidence that Dutton buried. I'm working on that. But there's a complication. Okonkwo's voice dropped even lower. Dutton knows I've been asking questions. He called me into his office yesterday and told me to stop wasting time on closed cases. Said I needed to focus on current threats. Translation: he knows you're getting close to something dangerous. I think so, and I think he's going to try to transfer me before I can finish the investigation. I saw a personnel request on his desk. Immediate reassignment to a desk job in Germany. Webb stood and moved to the window, looking out at the mountain landscape beginning to emerge in the gray light. How much time do we have? Maybe 48 hours before the transfer orders come through. After that, all my access gets revoked and the evidence stays buried. Then we have 48 hours to force Dutton's hand. Webb started pacing, his mind working through possibilities. We need to make him react, make him expose himself. How? By doing what I do best. By saving more lives that his incompetence puts at risk. Webb could see the pattern now, the way Dutton's pride and incompetence created a predictable cycle. He makes bad decisions, refuses to listen to intelligence, sends men into danger. We keep the men alive and make his failures visible. That is exactly what he expects you to do. Okonkwo said, he is setting a trap. There is a supply convoy scheduled to leave the base in 3 hours. High-value cargo heading to an outpost. Dutton specifically requested minimal security escort. Minimal security in an area with active Taliban presence. Exactly. And I have intelligence suggesting that local fighters know about the convoy schedule. She paused. If that convoy gets hit, and if you intervene again, Dutton will have MPs waiting to arrest you the moment you reveal your position. Webb smiled without humor. Then I will not reveal my position. How can you provide Overwatch without being seen? Who said anything about Overwatch? Webb moved back to his pack, checking his equipment. Sometimes the best way to stop an ambush is not to shoot your way out of it. Sometimes you attack the ambush before it happens. The radio was silent for a moment. You're going to hit the Taliban staging area. If they're planning to attack the convoy, they're gathering somewhere nearby right now. Weapons, vehicles, personnel. Find me their staging point, and I will make sure they never reach the convoy. That is suicide, Mr. Webb. You are one man with a rifle against potentially dozens of fighters. I have in worse odds. Webb checked his ammunition count. Besides, I am not entirely alone. The dog looked up at him, tail wagging slightly. Okonkwo sighed. I have drone footage from last night showing vehicle movement near a compound 4 kilometers north of the convoy route. Multiple armed individuals. Weapons being staged. Send me the coordinates. Already done. Check your tablet. Webb pulled out the small device Chun had included in the supplies, found a satellite imagery waiting. The compound was isolated, built into the side of a hill with limited approaches. Difficult to assault, but that worked both ways. Difficult to escape from as well. One more thing, Okonkwo said. When you do this, when you hit that compound, every military asset in the area is going to converge on your location. Dutton will order your capture. MPs, QRF, possibly air assets. You need an extraction plan. I will figure something out. Webb. Her voice was urgent now. What you are doing, what you have been doing, it matters. Those Rangers you saved, the patrol yesterday, the convoy today. Those men have families. They go home because of you. But if Dutton captures you, if he buries this deeper, then everything you have sacrificed will be for nothing. So we make sure he does not capture me. Webb shouldered his pack. And we make sure that when this is over, the truth comes out. All of it. I am with you. Whatever you need. Find Chun. Tell him what I am doing. Tell him if things go wrong. Make sure Okonkwo gets those files to someone who will act on them. Someone above Dutton's reach. Who? I do not know. But Chin will figure it out. He is a good NCO. Webb ended the transmission before she could argue further. He checked his rifle one final time, loaded his magazines, and prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous mission he had undertaken since leaving active duty. The dog stood beside the door, watching him with intelligent eyes. You should stay here, Webb said. This is going to get loud. The dog simply stared at him. Fine. But if we die, I'm blaming you for the bad idea. Webb opened the door and stepped into the cold morning air. 4 kilometers north, a group of Taliban fighters were preparing to attack a convoy of American soldiers. They were gathering weapons, loading vehicles, planning their ambush with the confidence of men who believed they had surprise on their side. They had no idea that a disgraced sniper with nothing left to lose was about to turn their ambush into a massacre. They had no idea that the ghost who had been haunting these mountains, protecting American soldiers from the shadows, was done being defensive. Marcus Webb had spent 18 months being hunted, being blamed, being thrown away like garbage. He had accepted it with silence and dignity, had tried to disappear, had attempted to move on with what remained of his shattered life. But Dutton had made a fatal mistake. He had kept pushing, kept threatening the lives of good soldiers, kept proving that he would never face consequences for his actions. And in doing so, he had given Webb something he thought he had lost forever. A mission, a purpose, and a reason to stop hiding. The Taliban compound was 4 kilometers away. The sun was rising behind the mountains, and Marcus Webb was going hunting. Webb approached the compound from the high ground, using the terrain and early morning shadows to mask his movement. The dog stayed close, moving with surprising stealth for an animal with a bad leg. Through his scope, he counted 17 fighters, maybe more inside the buildings. 3 technical vehicles mounted with heavy weapons. Crates of ammunition and RPGs stacked near the main structure. The smart play was to call in an airstrike and let precision munitions do the work. But that would alert Dutton, would bring the whole command structure down on this location, and Webb would lose any chance of staying free long enough for Okonkwo to finish her investigation. So he would have to do this the hard way. Alone, he found a position with overlapping fields of fire, settled into the rocks, and began the mental preparation that had always separated him from other snipers. Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world contracted to wind, distance, and the cold mathematics of trajectory. The first shot took the sentry on the north wall. The man dropped without a sound, and for 5 critical seconds nobody noticed. Webb used those seconds to eliminate the technical vehicle drivers, 3 quick shots that left the heavy weapons unmanned. Then chaos erupted. Fighters scrambled for cover, shouting warnings, trying to identify the threat. Webb worked systematically, prioritizing targets. The man reaching for the radio. The fighter running toward the heavy machine gun. The leader trying to organize a response. Return fire started coming his way, but it was undisciplined and poorly aimed. They knew the general direction, but not his exact position. Webb shifted slightly, found new angles, continued the methodical elimination of threats. His radio crackled. Chen's voice, urgent. Overwatch, I am hearing reports of contact at the compound. Please tell me that is you and not the convoy under attack. Convoy is clear. Webb transmitted between shots. Target is neutralized. Webb, you need to extract now. Dutton has launched QRF to your location. ETA 12 minutes. Copy. Almost done here. 2 fighters broke from cover, trying to reach one of the vehicles. Webb dropped them both. Another tried to use an RPG against his position, died before he could acquire the target. The compound was turning into a massacre, and the Taliban fighters were beginning to realize their only option was retreat. They started pulling back, dragging wounded, leaving equipment behind. Webb let them go. His mission was to stop the convoy ambush, not to chase fleeing fighters into the mountains. He packed up quickly, already planning his extraction route. The dog was waiting, watching him with what almost looked like approval. "Let's move," Webb said. They had covered maybe 500 meters when the helicopters appeared on the horizon. Blackhawks coming in fast and low. Webb dropped into a ravine, pulling the dog down with him. The aircraft thundered overhead, banking toward the compound. His radio came alive with military chatter. The QRF had arrived at the compound, was reporting multiple enemy Kia, abandoned weapons, and no sign of whoever had done the shooting. Dutton's voice cut through, demanding a perimeter search, ordering the helicopters to sweep the area. Webb stayed low, moving through the ravine system that would keep him below the line of sight. The dog matched his pace, its limp barely noticeable now as adrenaline overrode pain. Then a new voice on the radio. Chun, talking to his platoon. He was describing a grid coordinate for the search pattern, but something about his phrasing was off. Webb listened carefully, realized Chun was using an old infantry trick, embedding information in standard communications. The grid he was describing was actually a route, a path that would lead Webb away from the search teams. Webb adjusted his direction, following Chin's hidden instructions. The ravine opened into a valley, then a series of ridgelines that provided natural concealment. He could hear the helicopters in the distance, quartering the terrain, but they were searching the wrong areas. After 2 hours of hard movement, Webb reached an outcropping that gave him a view of FOB Mitchell. He settled in to rest, sharing water with the dog. His radio crackled again. Okonkwo's voice, barely audible. "Overwatch, you there?" "Here." The convoy made it through safely. 0 casualties. She paused. "Dutton is furious. He knows you hit that compound. He is demanding a full investigation into how you got intelligence about the ambush location." "Let him investigate." Webb drank from his canteen. "Did you make progress on the files?" "Yes. And I found something else. Chin has been talking to the other rangers who were at your court-martial. Sergeant Matthews admitted that Dutton threatened him with a deployment to the most dangerous sector in Afghanistan if he testified for you. Private Collins says Dutton promised him early rotation home if he stayed quiet. Building a case. More than that, Chin contacted someone through back channels. Someone who knew your father." Webb went very still. "I never knew my father. Apparently he knew you." Okonkwo's voice was gentle. "Your father was Command Sergeant Major James Webb. He served 32 years, retired in 2005. He died in 2007. That does not make sense. My mother said he left when I was 6. Your mother was protecting you. Your father did not leave. He was deep cover for special operations, the kind of assignments that do not exist in official records. He could not be part of your life because it would have put you at risk." Webb felt something crack in his chest. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father's last assignment before he retired was training and mentoring a young officer who showed promise in special operations tactics. That officer was Brendan Dutton, the colonel who helped his son frame you." The pieces were falling into place, but Webb could not see the complete picture yet. "You're saying this is personal, that the colonel knew who I was." "I am saying that your father's final efficiency report on Colonel Dutton was scathing. He recommended that Dutton be removed from special operations for lack of integrity and poor judgment. That recommendation damaged Dutton's career, prevented him from getting promoted to general. So when the colonel's son needed help covering up his mistakes and saw the name Marcus Webb on the roster, he saw an opportunity for revenge." Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry. I know this makes it worse. Actually, it makes it better." Webb stood up, looking out at the base in the distance. "It means this was never about me being a convenient scapegoat. It means the Duttons targeted me specifically because of who my father was. That is premeditation. That is conspiracy. That is evidence that cannot be explained away as a simple mistake." Chin has convinced 4 Rangers to come forward with testimony about Dutton's threats and intimidation. With the communications I found, and their testimony, and the proof that this was targeted revenge, we have a case. Not we, Lieutenant. You. Webb picked up his rifle. I am a disgraced contractor with no standing. But you are an intelligence officer with evidence of a conspiracy involving senior leaders. You could take this up the chain. They will bury me the same way they buried you. Not if you go high enough. Not if you find someone who cares more about justice than politics. The radio was silent for a long time. Then Okonkwo spoke again, her voice stronger. "I've been thinking about that. There's a colonel at division level, Annie Reeves. She has a reputation for integrity. She does not tolerate corruption. If anyone would act on this evidence, it would be her. Then, that is who you brief." Webb started moving again, the dog following. "But you need to do it soon, before Dutton realizes how close you are to exposing him. He already suspects. I think he's going to make a move against me tonight. Then we move first." Webb checked his watch. The convoy is safe. The ambush is stopped. Dutton has no excuse to keep men at risk today. This is our window. You get those files to Colonel Reeves. Chun gets the Rangers to sign sworn statements. And I stay out here where Dutton cannot bury me. Webby finds you first. Then you make sure the truth still comes out." Webb looked down at the dog, who was watching him with absolute trust. "I've spent 18 months running and hiding. I am done with that. If Dutton wants to come after me, let him come. But he's going to have to do it in the open, where everyone can see what he really is. Be careful, Webb. You too, Lieutenant." Webb ended the transmission and started planning his next move. He was done reacting, done defending, done being the ghost in the mountains. The Duttons had thrown him away, thinking they were eliminating a problem. They had actually created something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose, evidence that could destroy them, and allies willing to risk their own careers to see justice done. The war had shifted, and Marcus Webb intended to win it. The dog limped beside him as they moved deeper into the mountains, and for the first time in 18 months, Webb allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he was going to get his life back. Night fell over the mountains like a curtain, and Webb used the darkness to move closer to the base. Not to return, but to observe. From his position on a ridge 2 kilometers out, he could see the lights of FOB Mitchell, watch the patterns of movement, and listen to radio traffic that told him more than Dutton probably wanted anyone to know. The dog slept curled against his side, finally trusting him enough to let its guard down completely. Webb kept one hand on its matted fur, finding unexpected comfort in the simple warmth of another living thing that did not judge him, did not care about court-martials or discharge papers or anything except whether he had food and water to share. His radio broke squelch. Okonkwo's voice, tight with stress. "Webb, we have a problem. Talk to me. I went to brief Colonel Reeves like we discussed. Brought all the evidence. The communications, the testimony Chun collected, everything." She paused, and Webb could hear fear underneath the professional tone. Dutton was waiting in her office. "He knew I was coming. How? I do not know, but he has already filed charges against me. Unauthorized access to classified materials. Mishandling of sensitive information. Conduct unbecoming." She took a shaky breath. "He is having me arrested, Webb. MPs are outside my quarters right now." Webb felt ice form in his stomach. "What about the evidence? Did Reeves see it?" "She saw it. Read through all of it while Dutton stood there watching. And then she said she would need to conduct a thorough review before taking any action. She thanked me for bringing it to her attention and told me to cooperate fully with the investigation into my conduct. Translation, she is not going to do anything, or she's playing it smart, waiting to see which way the wind blows before committing." Okonkwo's voice hardened with anger. "Either way, I am done. By tomorrow morning, I will be in pretrial confinement, and Dutton will have buried this deeper than before. What about Chun and the Rangers who were willing to testify? Chun is being deployed. Emergency orders came through an hour ago. He ships out to an outpost in Helmand Province tomorrow morning. The other Rangers are being scattered to different units. Matthews is going to Kuwait. Collins to Qatar. Dutton is breaking up everyone who might corroborate the story." Webb stood up, his mind racing through possibilities. He is covering his tracks, making sure nobody can coordinate testimony. It is worse than that. Okonkwo's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I heard Dutton talking to his father on a secure line. I should not have been able to intercept it, but I routed the signal through a bypass before they locked me out of the system. Webb, they are planning something for you." "What kind of something?" "Colonel Dutton has contacts with certain intelligence agencies. Off-book operations. They are going to stage an incident. Make it look like you attacked American forces. Give them justification to eliminate you as a threat. Webb felt his blood run cold. When? Tonight. There is a patrol scheduled to pass through your likely area of operation. Dutton is going to have them fire on your position, claim you engaged first, and then call in an airstrike to eliminate the threat. He's going to murder me and call it legitimate combat operations. Yes, and with me in custody, with Chun deployed, with all the witnesses scattered, there will be nobody left to challenge the narrative. You will be the deranged former soldier who went rogue and was killed while attacking American troops. Webb checked his watch. When is the patrol scheduled? They left the base 15 minutes ago. Webb, you need to run. Get out of the area. Cross into Pakistan if you have to. Just disappear. And let Dutton win? Let him bury the truth and keep putting good soldiers at risk? What choice do you have? If you stay, you die. If you run, at least you are alive. Webb looked out at the base, at the lights and the fences, and the whole machinery of military bureaucracy that had chewed him up and spit him out. He thought about his father, a man he had never known, who had spent 32 years serving with honor only to have his final act of integrity used as an excuse to destroy his son. He thought about the 6 men who died in Helmand because Dutton would not listen to intelligence, about the 22 Rangers who almost died in that valley, about the convoy that would have been slaughtered this morning, about all the future soldiers who would pay the price if Dutton remained in command. And he thought about the fact that running would mean accepting that the truth did not matter, that corruption won, that good men could be destroyed by those willing to abuse their power. "I'm not running," Webb said quietly. "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to make Dutton come after me personally. I'm going to force his hand in a way that cannot be covered up or explained away." Webb started moving, heading toward a position he had scouted days earlier. "Where is Colonel Reeves right now?" "In her office at the operations center." "Why?" "Because I need a witness. Someone senior enough that Dutton cannot intimidate them. Someone who will see exactly what kind of man he really is." "Webb, that is insane. How are you going to get Reeves to witness anything?" "By giving Dutton what he wants. Me. Out in the open. An easy target." Webb reached the position he was looking for, a ridgeline with clear line of sight to the base, but also visible from multiple observation points. "Except I want to make sure that when he takes a shot, everyone is watching. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using myself as evidence." Webb began setting up, not for a shot, but for a broadcast. He pulled out the tactical radio, the one that could transmit on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "When Dutton tries to kill me, I want on record. I want every radio in the area of operations to hear exactly what happens." The dog whined softly, sensing the tension. Webb scratched its ear. "It is okay," he murmured. "We knew it was going to come to this." Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. "If this does not work, if Reeves does not act, you'll be dead, and I will be in prison, and Dutton will have won completely. Then we better make sure it works." Webb keyed the radio to the command frequency. "Attention all stations. This is Marcus Webb, former Army Ranger, dishonorably discharged 18 months ago. I am transmitting from Grid November, Whiskey 4273. I am unarmed and requesting to surrender to proper military authority." The radio erupted with crosstalk, confusion, demands for authentication, and underneath it all, Dutton's voice, sharp with barely controlled fury. "All stations, disregard that transmission. Subject is dangerous and not to be approached." Webb transmitted again. "I have evidence of corruption and conspiracy involving senior officers. I am requesting immediate extraction and protection while I provide testimony." Negative, Dutton shot back. "Subject is wanted for multiple violations of military law. Lethal force is authorized." Webb smiled grimly. There it was, Dutton showing his hand, making it clear this was not about justice, but about silencing a witness. He continued transmitting, describing the evidence Okonkwo had found, naming names, laying out the entire conspiracy for anyone listening. Through his scope, he could see vehicles leaving the base. Not just the patrol that was supposed to kill him, but others. People were responding to his broadcast, coming to investigate. And among them, he hoped, was someone who cared enough about the truth to look past Dutton's narrative. The dog pressed closer to him, and Webb realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the weight of what he was doing. 18 months of silence, of accepting injustice, of letting himself be thrown away. And now, in one transmission, he was fighting back with the only weapon he had left: the truth. Headlights appeared on the road, leading toward his position. Multiple vehicles. The patrol was approaching, and behind them, command vehicles. Someone senior was coming to see this personally. Webb keyed the radio one more time. "I am Command Sergeant Major James Webb's son. My father served with honor for 32 years. He taught me that integrity matters more than rank, that truth matters more than politics, and that a soldier's duty is to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He took a breath, watching the vehicles get closer. Major Ryan Dutton murdered my career to cover his mistakes. Colonel Brendan Dutton helped him do it as revenge for my father's honest assessment of his character. And tonight they are planning to murder me to keep that truth buried. He paused. "I am here, unarmed, broadcasting on open channels. Let's see if they have the courage to do it where everyone can see." The vehicle stopped 400 meters away. Webb could see figures emerging, taking positions. Through his scope, he recognized Dutton's vehicle, saw the major standing beside it with a radio in hand. The hunt was over. The confrontation was here, and Marcus Webb was done running. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Webb stood on the ridgeline, hands raised above his head, the radio transmitting his location to anyone listening. The dog sat beside him, alert but calm, as if understanding that running was no longer an option. Then Dutton's voice cut through the radio frequency, cold and controlled. "Subject has refused orders to surrender. All units prepare to engage." Webb keyed his transmit button. "I'm standing here with my hands up, unarmed, broadcasting on an open channel. The entire area of operations can hear this. If Major Dutton orders fire on an unarmed man attempting to surrender, that is murder. You are a fugitive and a threat," Dutton shot back. "You have interfered with military operations, stolen weapons, and endangered American lives." "I saved American lives. 22 Rangers in a valley. A patrol walking into an ambush. A convoy that would have been destroyed this morning." Webb kept his voice steady, speaking not to Dutton, but to everyone listening. "And I am prepared to testify under oath about why those lives needed saving. About the tactical incompetence that put them at risk. About the conspiracy to cover up that incompetence by destroying an innocent soldier's career." More vehicles were arriving now. Webb could see officers emerging, radios in hand. One vehicle in particular caught his attention, a command Humvee with Colonel's insignia. Colonel Reeves had come personally. "Stand down," Webb Dutton ordered. "You are making this worse." "How can I make it worse? You already took everything from me. My career, my honor, my future." Webb felt 18 months of suppressed emotion rising in his voice. "You framed me for your mistakes. You and your father used my name to save your careers. And tonight you plan to kill me and call it justice. Those are serious accusations," a new voice cut in. "Colonel Reeves," her tone neutral but commanding. "Do you have evidence to support these claims?" "Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo has compiled extensive evidence, ma'am. Communications between Major Dutton and Colonel Brendan Dutton at CENTCOM. Testimony from Rangers who were threatened into silence. Radio logs that were edited to remove my warnings before the Helmand incident." Webb paused. "The lieutenant is currently under arrest on charges filed by Major Dutton to prevent her from presenting that evidence to you." "Major Dutton," Reeves said, her voice sharp. "Is this true? Is Lieutenant Okonkwo in custody?" A long pause, then Dutton's voice, carefully controlled. "She accessed classified materials without authorization, ma'am. I had no choice but to file charges." "What materials?" Another pause. "That is classified, ma'am." Webb could hear the calculation in Reeves' voice when she spoke again. "Classified materials relating to a court-martial that occurred 18 months ago. Materials that apparently contain communications between you and your father regarding how to handle that court-martial." The silence stretched. Webb watched through the darkness as figures moved near the vehicles. Someone was arguing, gestures sharp and angry. Then Chen's voice broke into the frequency. unexpected and clear. "Ma'am, this is Sergeant David Chun. I was at the court-martial for Marcus Webb. I testified against him because Major Dutton threatened my family. My wife works for State Department. He said her clearance would be revoked if I told the truth. He said I would be deployed to the most dangerous sector in Afghanistan and left there until I was killed or broken." More voices joining now. Sergeant Matthews confirming similar threats. Private Collins describing promises of early rotation home in exchange for silence. The dam was breaking. Soldiers finding courage in numbers, speaking truth that had been suppressed for 18 months. Dutton's voice cut through, desperate now. These men are lying. They are coordinating false testimony to protect a traitor. Why would they lie, Major? Webb transmitted. What do they gain? They are admitting to perjury at their own court-martials. They are risking their careers to tell the truth. The only person with something to lose here is you. Movement near the command vehicle. Colonel Reeves was walking forward toward Webb's position, a flashlight in one hand and a sidearm holstered at her hip. Behind her, several other officers followed. Dutton was shouting into his radio now. "Ma'am, I strongly advise against approaching the subject. He is dangerous and unstable." Reeves ignored him, continuing her steady approach. Behind her, Webb saw Dutton climb into a vehicle, heading toward the ridgeline as well. Webb kept his hands raised as Reeves climbed the slope. When she was 20 meters away, she stopped and raised the flashlight, illuminating him clearly. He stood without moving, letting her see that he was indeed unarmed, that the dog beside him was the only companion he had. "Mr. Webb," Reeves called out, "I am going to approach you. Do not move." "Yes, ma'am." She covered the distance carefully, professionally, one hand near her weapon. When she reached him, she studied his face for a long moment. "You are taking an enormous risk broadcasting your position like this." "Respectfully, ma'am, I had no other options left. They were going to kill me and bury the truth. This was the only way to make sure someone saw what really happened." The evidence Lieutenant Okonkwo collected. "It is genuine? Every word, ma'am. She can walk you through the entire case. Communications, testimony, timeline, all of it." Reeves nodded slowly. "And you are prepared to testify under oath?" "I have been ready to tell the truth for 18 months, ma'am. I just needed someone willing to listen." Engines roared behind them. Dutton's vehicle was racing up the hillside, approaching faster than was safe on the rough terrain. Reeves turned, her expression hardening. The vehicle skidded to a stop 30 meters away. Dutton jumped out, his sidearm drawn, his face twisted with fury. "Step away from him, Colonel. He is a fugitive and a threat." Reeves did not move. "Holster your weapon, Major. That is an order. He has endangered lives, interfered with operations. He is not entitled to surrender." "Every soldier is entitled to surrender, Dutton." Reeves' voice was ice. "Lower your weapon now." Webb saw it then, the moment when Dutton realized he had lost. The moment when a desperate man made the choice that would destroy him completely. Dutton raised his pistol, pointing it not at Webb, but at Reeves. "You do not understand what is at stake here," Dutton said, his voice shaking. "My career, my father's legacy, everything we have built. I am not going to let it be destroyed by some nobody contractor who could not follow orders." The radio was still transmitting. Every word was being broadcast to every unit in the area. Dozens of soldiers were listening to a major threaten a colonel with a weapon because she was protecting the chain of command and due process. Reeves remained calm. "Major Dutton, you are making a mistake that you cannot come back from. Lower your weapon, and we can resolve this through proper channels." "There are no proper channels anymore." Dutton's hand was shaking now. "You think anyone will care about some disgraced sniper? You think they will believe his word over mine? Over my father's?" "I think," Reeves said quietly, "that you are currently pointing a weapon at a superior officer while making statements that constitute threats, conspiracy, and admission of obstruction of justice, all of which is being broadcast on an open military frequency." Dutton's face went pale. He looked at his radio, realized what he had done, what he had admitted. Multiple vehicles were converging on the hillside now. Military police, command staff, soldiers who had heard the broadcast and were responding. Chin was there, weapon ready but not aimed. Matthews and Collins emerging from trucks, faces grim. Dutton looked around wildly, seeing the trap closing. His weapon wavered between Reeves and Webb. "It is over, Ryan," Reeves said, using his first name. "You have lost. Put down the weapon and face this with whatever dignity you have left." For a moment, Webb thought Dutton might actually shoot, might try to kill his way out of the situation he had created. But then the major's shoulders sagged, the weapon lowered, and he dropped to his knees. MPs were on him in seconds, securing the weapon, placing him in restraints. He did not resist, did not speak, just stared at the ground as his career and his freedom evaporated. Reeves turned back to Webb. "You are still under arrest, Mr. Webb. There are procedures that must be followed. But I give you my word that you will have a fair investigation this time." Webb lowered his hands slowly. "Thank you, ma'am. That is all I ever wanted." As MPs approached to take him into custody, Chun stepped forward. "I will escort him personally, ma'am. Make sure he is treated properly." Reeves nodded. "See that you do, Sergeant." Webb allowed Chun to lead him toward the vehicles. As they walked, Chun spoke quietly. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Webb corrected. "You and Okonkwo and all the Rangers who found the courage to speak up. I just made sure everyone was watching when the truth came out." The dog limped along beside them until an MP tried to shoo it away. Webb stopped. "That dog comes with me." "Sir, we cannot bring a stray into custody. That dog has been with me through all of this. It does not leave my side." Chun intervened. "I will take responsibility for the animal. Whatever happens to Webb, happens to the dog." Webb looked at his unlikely ally, the man who had testified against him and then spent months drowning in guilt. "Thank you. It is the least I can do." Chun managed a small smile. "Besides, that dog has better judgment than most officers I know. It chose you when nobody else would." They loaded Webb into a vehicle. The dog settled at his feet. As they drove back toward the base, Webb watched through the window as Dutton was placed in a separate vehicle, heading not to his quarters but to pre-trial confinement. The war was not over. There would be investigations, hearings, testimony. But for the first time in 18 months, Marcus Webb was not fighting alone in the darkness. The truth was out, witnessed by dozens of soldiers, recorded on official channels, impossible to bury. Dutton had thrown him away, thinking it would make him disappear. Instead, it had made him dangerous. And tonight, that danger had finally caught up with the men who thought they were untouchable. The investigation took 6 days. 6 days of Webb sitting in a secure room at FOB Mitchell, no longer a prisoner, but not quite free either. The dog stayed with him, officially designated as evidence since it had been present during multiple incidents. Chun brought food twice daily and updates when he could. Colonel Reeves had brought in investigators from outside the chain of command, people with no connection to either Dutton. The JAG officer assigned to Webb's case was a major named Patricia Holmes, a woman with 20 years of experience and a reputation for not suffering fools or corruption. On the third day, Holmes interviewed Webb for 7 hours straight, walking through every detail of the Hellman incident, the court-martial, and the events of the past week. She took notes in silence, her face betraying nothing. On the fourth day, Okonkwo was released from custody. She came to see Webb immediately, exhausted but vindicated. "They are listening," she said. "Really listening this time. Reeves has people going through every file, every communication, every piece of evidence." She sat down heavily. Dutton's father tried to intervene, called in favors, made threats. But Reeves went over his head straight to a 3-star general she served with in Iraq, someone who values integrity over politics. What about the major? Okonkwo's smile was grim. In confinement, facing charges of threatening a superior officer, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, abuse of authority, and about 15 other violations. His JAG lawyer tried to argue that he was under stress, that his statements were taken out of context. She pulled out her tablet. Then they played back the radio recordings of him threatening Colonel Reeves with a weapon while admitting to conspiracy. Context was pretty clear. And his father? Under investigation by the Inspector General. Turns out when you help your son frame an innocent soldier, it leaves a paper trail if anyone bothers to look. All those carefully worded emails and encrypted messages that seemed so clever 18 months ago now look like evidence of conspiracy. On the fifth day, Chen brought word that the original radio logs from Hellman had been recovered from the backup servers. The unedited versions that showed Webb's repeated warnings about the compound being a trap, his accurate intelligence assessments, his recommendations for alternative approaches that Dutton had ignored. The evidence is overwhelming, Chun said, scratching the dog's ears. The investigators have talked to everyone who was involved in the original court-martial. Half of them are admitting they were threatened or pressured. The ones who still support Dutton's version are changing their stories when confronted with actual facts. Webb felt a weight beginning to lift. Is it really over? Not over, but getting there. Chun hesitated. There's going to be a hearing tomorrow. Full review of your case. Major Holmes will present her findings. Colonel Reeves will make a determination about your status. What do you think she will decide? I think, Chin said slowly, that you're going to get your life back. That night, Webb could not sleep. He sat by the small window, the dog's head resting on his lap, watching the stars over the Afghan mountains. He thought about his father, the man he never knew who had apparently spent his career serving with the same dedication to truth that had cost Webb everything. He thought about the 6 men who died in Helmand, wondering if clearing his name would bring them any measure of justice. He thought about the soldiers he had saved over the past week, the lives that would have been lost if he had chosen to simply disappear. And he thought about what came next, if Reeves cleared him, if his discharge was overturned, if he was offered a chance to return to the army that had thrown him away. The hearing took place in a conference room that had been converted into an impromptu courtroom. Colonel Reeves sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 other senior officers brought in to ensure impartiality. Major Holmes stood to present her findings. Webb sat across from them, Chun and Okonkwo behind him in silent support. Holmes began by methodically destroying every piece of evidence used in the original court-martial. The radio logs were edited. The witness testimony was coerced through threats and promises. The investigation was conducted by the very officer who made the tactical errors being investigated. She presented the unedited communications showing Webb's accurate intelligence and ignored warnings. Then she presented the evidence of conspiracy, the messages between the 2 Duttons, the systematic intimidation of witnesses, the targeted selection of Webb as a scapegoat based on his father's history with Colonel Dutton. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Reeves spoke first. Mr. Webb, the evidence makes clear that you were the victim of a coordinated effort to obstruct justice and destroy your career. The original court-martial was fundamentally flawed, and its verdict cannot stand. Webb felt his heart hammering in his chest. Based on Major Holmes' investigation and the evidence presented, I am recommending that your discharge be overturned and all associated penalties be removed from your record. She paused. Additionally, I am recommending that you receive a formal apology from the Department of the Army and that compensation be considered for the 18 months of service you were wrongfully denied. The other officers nodded in agreement. Furthermore, Reeves continued, your actions over the past week, while technically in violation of numerous regulations, were undertaken to save American lives and expose corruption within the chain of command. Under different circumstances, such actions might warrant recognition rather than censure. Webb found his voice. Ma'am, I just want my record cleared. I want the truth on file. That is enough. Reeves studied him for a moment. The Army needs soldiers like you, Mr. Webb. Men who value integrity over politics. Who will do the right thing, even when it costs them everything. She glanced at her fellow officers. It is a recommendation of this panel that you be offered immediate reinstatement at your former rank, with the option to continue your career in any capacity you choose. Webb felt something crack in his chest, 18 months of grief and anger finally releasing. Thank you, ma'am. There's one more thing. Reeves nodded to an aide, who brought forward a folder. Your father's final efficiency report on Colonel Brendan Dutton has been declassified as part of this investigation. Command Sergeant Major Webb wrote that Dutton lacked the integrity and judgment necessary for special operations, that he prioritized personal advancement over mission success, that he was a danger to the soldiers under his command. She passed the folder to Webb. Your father was right, and his son proved willing to sacrifice everything to prevent that danger from continuing. That is a legacy worth honoring. Webb opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was his father's report, written in precise military language that somehow conveyed both disappointment and duty. At the bottom, in a section for personal remarks, his father had written something that made Webb's eyes sting. The measure of a soldier is not rank or decorations, but the willingness to stand for truth even when standing alone. I hope my son inherits this quality, as it is the only legacy worth leaving. The hearing concluded with formal documentation of the findings. Webb signed papers restoring his rank, his clearances, his status as an active duty soldier. Chin shook his hand with tears in his eyes. Okonkwo hugged him, professionalism forgotten in the moment of victory. As they left the room, Chin stopped him. There is someone who wants to see you. They walked across the base to a medical building. Inside, in a small office, sat Sergeant First Class Martinez's widow. Webb had never met her, but he recognized her from the photo Martinez had carried in his wallet. She stood when he entered, her eyes red but her bearing strong. Mr. Webb. She paused. Sergeant Webb, I heard what happened. What you did. How you proved Ryan Dutton was responsible for my husband's death. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for your loss. She stepped forward and took his hands. Miguel talked about you. Said you were the best sniper he ever worked with. Said if everyone listened to you, fewer men would die. She squeezed his hands. He would be proud of what you did. Proud that you never gave up on the truth. Webb could not speak past the lump in his throat. I want you to know that the Army is reopening the investigation into the Helmand incident. Now that your name is cleared, they're looking at Dutton's responsibility for those deaths. She managed a small smile. Miguel will get justice. Finally, after she left, Webb walked outside with Chun and the dog. The afternoon sun was bright, the base alive with normal activity. Soldiers going about their duties, vehicles moving supplies, helicopters lifting off for routine patrols. Everything looked the same. But for Webb, everything had changed. So what now, Chin asked. They offered you any assignment you want. Where do you go? Webb looked at the mountains in the distance, then down at the dog sitting patiently at his feet. I was thinking instructor duty, training new snipers, teaching them not just how to shoot, but why integrity matters, why standing up for the truth is worth any cost. Chin smiled. The Army needs that. Needs you. What about you? They canceled my deployment orders to Helmand. Turns out those were punishment postings arranged by Dutton. She shook his head. I am staying right here, working with Okonkwo on fixing the intelligence failures that let Dutton operate unchecked for so long. Good. Webb started walking toward the barracks. The world needs more soldiers willing to speak truth, even when it is hard. Learn from the best, Chin said quietly. That night, Webb slept in a proper bunk for the first time in a week. The dog curled up on the floor beside him, finally safe, finally home. And for the first time in 18 months, Marcus Webb fell asleep without the weight of injustice crushing his chest. He had been thrown away, discarded like garbage, destroyed by men who valued their careers over truth. But he had refused to stay buried, had fought back with nothing but integrity and the determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. And in the end, that had been enough. Tomorrow he would officially return to duty, would pin on the rank he had earned, would begin rebuilding the career that had been stolen from him. But tonight, he was simply a soldier who had done his duty, who had stood for truth when standing alone, who had honored his father's legacy in the only way that mattered, by refusing to let corruption win, by proving that throwing someone away was a very, very bad move. 3 weeks later, Webb stood in formation wearing a uniform that fit properly for the first time in 18 months. The stripes on his sleeve had been restored, his name taped straight and crisp, his boots polished to mirror shine. The dog sat at attention beside him, officially designated as a military working dog in training, though everyone knew it was really just Webb's companion who happened to be on the payroll. The formation was small, but significant. Chun stood to his left, promoted to staff sergeant for his role in exposing the conspiracy. Okonkwo stood to his right, now a captain after an accelerated promotion that recognized both her investigative work and her courage in standing against corruption. Behind them were the Rangers who had found their voices, Matthews and Collins, and a dozen others who had chosen truth over fear. Colonel Reeves stood at the front of the formation, a small wooden box in her hands. The entire base had turned out to witness what was about to happen, soldiers lining the area in their dress uniforms, a level of ceremony usually reserved for much higher ranks. Sergeant Marcus Webb, Reeves' voice carried across the formation. Front and center, Webb marched forward, his movements precise, his bearing that of a soldier who had earned every step. He came to attention before Reeves, saluted, and held it until she returned the gesture. 18 months ago, Reeves began, "You were falsely accused of dereliction of duty. Your warnings were ignored. Your intelligence was dismissed. And when 6 soldiers died because of decisions you argued against, you were made the scapegoat for another man's failures." The assembled soldiers listened in absolute silence. For 18 months you lived with a dishonor you did not earn, serving in the only capacity left to you, never speaking against the injustice, never seeking revenge. And when you finally had the opportunity to expose the truth, you did so not for personal vindication, but to save the lives of soldiers who had testified against you. Reeves opened the box. Inside, gleaming on blue ribbon, was a silver star. The United States Army does not give medals for being right when others are wrong. But we do recognize extraordinary heroism in combat. Over the past month, investigators have documented your actions during the week preceding your reinstatement. You engaged enemy forces alone while protecting American patrols. You prevented multiple ambushes that would have resulted in mass casualties. You placed yourself in mortal danger repeatedly to save soldiers who owed you nothing. She lifted the medal from its case. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidation in action against an enemy of the United States, you are hereby awarded the Silver Star. Your courage under fire and dedication to protecting American lives exemplify the highest traditions of military service. Reeves pinned the medal to Webb's chest, then stepped back and saluted. The formation erupted in applause, hundreds of soldiers acknowledging not just the medal, but everything it represented. Webb's throat was tight as he returned the salute. "Thank you, ma'am. There's one more thing." Reeves nodded to an aide, who brought forward another folder. "The Department of the Army has completed its review of the Helmand Province incident. Major Ryan Dutton has been found guilty at court-martial of dereliction of duty, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and 6 counts of negligent homicide. He has been sentenced to 15 years in military prison and given a dishonorable discharge." A murmur ran through the formation. Justice had been slow, but it had arrived. Colonel Brendan Dutton has been stripped of his rank and retired under other than honorable conditions. He is being investigated by multiple agencies for his role in the conspiracy. Reeves closed the folder. The 6 soldiers who died in Helmand have been formally acknowledged as casualties of command negligence rather than tactical failure. Their families have been notified that their loved ones serve with honor. Webb thought of Martinez, of the photo he had carried, of the widow who had thanked Webb for bringing truth to light. The weight of those deaths would never fully leave him, but at least now they were remembered properly. Additionally, Reeves continued, "There is the matter of your next assignment. You requested instructor duty, training new snipers at Fort Benning. That request has been approved, effective immediately." The formation applauded again. Webb would be going home to the continental United States, to a position where he could shape the next generation of soldiers and ensure they understood that skill with a rifle was meaningless without integrity to guide it. After the ceremony, soldiers lined up to shake Webb's hand. Men he had saved without their knowledge. Rangers who had been in that valley. Members of the convoy that had made it through safely. Each one thanking him. Each one acknowledging that they owed their lives to a man who had refused to give up. Chin approached with a broad smile. "Instructor Webb has a nice ring to it." "It does." Webb looked down at the dog, who had remained perfectly still throughout the ceremony. "Though I'm not sure how they will feel about my teaching assistant. That dog has better tactical sense than most lieutenants." It will be fine. Okonkwo joined them, her new captain's bars gleaming. I have been assigned to the Training and Doctrine Command at Fort Benning as well. Apparently, the Army decided that someone who can dig through classified files and expose conspiracies might be useful in developing better oversight protocols. So we all end up in the same place, Chen said. The three of us who refused to let this die. Not just the three of us. Webb gestured to the formation, to the soldiers still gathered. Every person who spoke up. Every ranger who admitted they were threatened. Every witness who finally told the truth. We all did this together. A young private approached, nervous but determined. Sergeant Webb, sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I was in that convoy, the one you saved from the ambush. I have a daughter at home. She is 2 years old. Because of you, I'm going to see her grow up. Webb shook his hand. That is what we do, private. We look out for each other, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. As the formation dispersed, Webb found a quiet moment to stand alone with his thoughts. The mountains of Afghanistan rose in the distance, the same peaks he had watched from the ridgeline when he made his final stand. The same terrain where he had spent 18 months as a ghost, protecting soldiers who did not know he existed. He thought about his father's words, about the legacy of standing for truth even when standing alone. He had inherited that quality, had proven it in ways his father would never know. But somehow, looking at the report his father had written, reading those final words about the only legacy worth leaving, Webb felt a connection across time and death to a man he had never met. The dog pressed against his leg, and Webb reached down to scratch its ears. You and me, we are quite a team. Both of us thrown away. Both of us refusing to stay down. Shun appeared at his shoulder. There's a transport leaving for Bugram in an hour. From there, a flight to Germany, then home to the States. You ready to leave Afghanistan? Webb took one last look at the mountains, at the base, at the place where he had lost everything and then fought to get it back. I am ready. They walked toward the landing zone together, Chun, Okonkwo, and Webb with the dog trotting beside them. Soldiers saluted as they passed, acknowledging not just rank, but respect earned through action. At the helicopter, Chun stopped. I never properly apologized. For the court-martial. For not speaking up when I should have. You were protecting your family. I understand that. Understanding does not erase guilt. Chen's voice was rough with emotion. But I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my career making sure no one else goes through what you did. Making sure soldiers know they can speak truth without fear. That is all I can ask. Webb extended his hand. Brothers? Chen gripped it firmly. Brothers. Okonkwo hugged them both. The Army just got a lot better, gentlemen. Because we are not going to let them forget what happens when politics trumps integrity. The helicopter's rotors began to spin up. Webb climbed aboard, the dog following. As they lifted off, he watched FOB Mitchell shrink below them, watched the mountains recede, watched Afghanistan become a landscape of memory rather than present reality. He was leaving as a different man than he had arrived 18 months ago. Then, he had been broken, discarded, convinced that honor and justice were fairy tales told to naive soldiers. Now he knew better. Justice was slow. Honor was costly. Truth required sacrifice. But they were real, and they were worth fighting for. The helicopter banked toward Bugram, toward the beginning of the long journey home. Webb settled back in his seat, the silver star on his chest, his name cleared, his future bright with possibility. Ryan Dutton had thrown him away, thinking it would solve a problem. Instead, it had created a soldier who understood that true strength was not in rank or position, but in the courage to stand for what was right regardless of the cost. It had been a very bad move on Dutton's part, and Webb had made him pay for it in full. Now it was time to go home, to teach young soldiers about more than shooting, to teach them about integrity, about courage, about the kind of honor that could not be taken away by any court-martial or conspiracy. To teach them that being thrown away did not define you. How you fought back did. The mountains of Afghanistan disappeared behind them. Webb closed his eyes and, for the first time in 18 months, allowed himself to feel something he thought was lost forever. Peace. 6 months later, Sergeant Marcus Webb stood at the front of a classroom at Fort Benning, Georgia, facing 24 young soldiers who had just completed basic sniper training. The dog, now officially named Ranger and sporting a service vest, lay in the corner watching the class with patient attention. The students sat at attention, notebooks open, eager to learn from an instructor whose reputation had preceded him. They knew the story, or parts of it anyway. The sniper who had been wrongly discharged. The conspiracy that tried to bury him. The week in Afghanistan where he had saved dozens of lives while being hunted by the very army he was protecting. But Webb did not teach them about that. Not directly. A sniper's most important weapon is not the rifle, he said, pacing slowly at the front of the room. It is not the scope or the rangefinder or any piece of equipment. Your most important weapon is your integrity. The students exchanged glances, expecting a lecture on marksmanship, not philosophy. You can make every shot in the book, Webb continued. You can range targets at 2,000 meters. You can compensate for wind, elevation, temperature, the Coriolis effect. But if you do not have the courage to tell command when they are wrong, if you cannot stand up and say that a mission is a bad idea, then all that skill is worthless. He stopped at the window, looking out at the training ranges. I'm going to tell you something they do not put in the manual. There will be times when following orders will get people killed. Times when a superior officer makes a decision based on politics or pride instead of tactical reality. And in those moments, you will have to choose between your career and your conscience. A young specialist in the front row raised his hand. What happens if we choose conscience? Sometimes you lose everything, Webb said honestly. Sometimes you get thrown away like you never mattered. Sometimes the system protects the powerful instead of the truthful. The classroom was silent. But sometimes, Webb turned back to face them, sometimes you save lives. Sometimes you prevent disasters. Sometimes you force the truth into the light where it cannot be buried. And those times make all the risk worthwhile. He walked to his desk and picked up a folder. This is the after-action report from an operation in Helmand Province. The commanding officer ordered an assault on a compound that intelligence identified as a trap. The sniper on Overwatch reported multiple indicators of ambush. The commander ignored those reports and sent 2 squads into the kill zone. 6 men died in the first minute. The students listened, absorbed. The sniper was blamed for those deaths. Accused of abandoning his position, failing his duty, compromising the mission. He was court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. For 18 months, he lived with that stain on his record, knowing he had done everything right and been punished for it anyway. "Why are you telling us this, Sergeant?" a corporal asked. "To scare us?" "No." Webb set down the folder. "To prepare you. Because that sniper was me. And I'm standing here today because I never stopped believing that truth matters. Because soldiers who knew the Real story found the courage to speak up. Because one intelligence officer cared more about justice than her career. Because integrity always wins in the long run, even when it seems impossible." The room was absolutely silent now. You're going to graduate from this course with the skills to be effective snipers. You will learn everything about ballistics and field craft and tactical positioning. But none of that matters if you do not understand why we do this. We protect soldiers who cannot protect themselves. We serve the mission, not our careers. We speak truth even when it costs us everything. Webb pulled up a photograph on the screen behind him. It showed 22 Rangers in a valley, weapons ready, looking exhausted but alive. This was taken 3 days after those Rangers were trapped in an ambush. They survived because someone with no authority and no official standing used a stolen rifle to provide overwatch. Someone who had been thrown away but refused to stop being a soldier. He advanced to the next photo. A convoy of vehicles, intact and undamaged. This convoy was targeted for ambush. It made it through safely because someone hit the Taliban staging area before they could execute their attack. Same someone, still unauthorized, still officially a disgraced civilian contractor. Next photo, a formation ceremony with Colonel Reeves pinning a silver star. This was the day the Army admitted they were wrong, that the conspiracy was real, that throwing someone away does not make them disappear, it just makes them fight harder. Webb turned back to the class. Every one of you is going to face moments that test your character. Moments where doing the right thing will cost you. And in those moments, I want you to remember that your job is not to advance your career or protect your commander's reputation. Your job is to bring soldiers home alive. A private in the back raised her hand. What happened to the officer who framed you, Sergeant? 15 years in military prison. Dishonorable discharge. His father was stripped of rank and forced into retirement. The conspiracy was exposed. The 6 soldiers who died had their deaths properly attributed to command negligence. Their families got truth instead of lies. And that was worth 18 months of disgrace, another student asked. Webb thought about Martinez's widow, about the Rangers who had thanked him, about Chun and Okonkwo, and all the soldiers whose lives had been saved because he refused to give up. It was worth every second. Ranger stood up from his corner and walked to Webb's side, tail wagging slowly. Webb scratched the dog's scarred ear. This dog was a stray on a base in Afghanistan. Other people kicked it away. I fed it. It followed me through the worst week of my life, stayed with me when I had nothing, refused to abandon me even when things got dangerous. He looked at the class. Loyalty is not complicated. You stand by those who cannot stand alone. You protect those who are vulnerable. You refuse to throw anyone away just because it is convenient. The class period ended, but none of the students moved. Finally, the specialist in front spoke. Sergeant Webb, what do we do if we see our command making bad decisions? How do we know when to speak up? Webb smiled slightly. You will know. Your gut will tell you when something is wrong. The question is whether you will have the courage to act on it, whether you will value integrity over comfort, whether you will be willing to pay the price for doing what is right. And if they do not listen, then you do what I did. You find another way. You protect your soldiers any way you can. You refuse to let good people die for bad decisions. And you never, ever stop fighting for the truth. As the students filed out, several stopped to shake Webb's hand, to ask questions, to thank him for the lesson. When the last one left, Chun appeared in the doorway. Still giving the same speech about integrity over orders, Chun said with a grin, "It is the only speech that matters." Webb gathered his materials. How'd your class go? Good. Teaching tactical communications to the next generation. Making sure they understand that lying in reports gets people killed. Okonkwo joined them, fresh from her own class on intelligence analysis and the importance of speaking truth to power. Between the 3 of us, we are corrupting an entire generation of soldiers with dangerous ideas about honesty and accountability. Webb laughed. Somebody has to. They walked across the base together, Ranger trotting beside them. The Georgia's sun was warm, the sky clear, the air filled with the sounds of training. Young soldiers learning to be better than the generation before them. Learning that honor was not just a word in the creed, but a choice made every single day. Webb's phone buzzed. A message from Martinez's widow. Her son had just enlisted, was heading to basic training in 2 weeks. He wants to be a sniper, the message read. Like his father. Like you. Can you make sure he learns what really matters? Webb typed back. It would be an honor. They reached the parking lot where their vehicles waited. Chen was heading to meet his family for dinner. Okonkwo had a date with a medical officer she had been seeing. Webb was going back to his small apartment off base, the one where Ranger had claimed the best spot on the couch. Normal lives. Routine days. The kind of boring, peaceful existence that seemed impossible 18 months ago. Before we go, Chen said, I got word today. The Army is creating a new oversight position. Independent Investigation Authority for reports of command misconduct. They are calling it the Martinez Protocol after the sergeant who died trying to do the right thing. Named after the man who would have cleared my name if he had survived, Webb said softly. Named after the man whose death you made sure meant something, Okonkwo corrected. Because you refused to let the truth die with him. Webb looked at his friends, the people who had risked everything to stand with him. We did that together. Yeah, Chen said. We did. They parted ways with promises to meet up over the weekend. Webb drove home with Ranger in the passenger seat, the dog's head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. At his apartment, Webb changed into civilian clothes and made dinner, sharing bits of chicken with Ranger. After eating, He sat on the couch and pulled out the folder he kept in his desk. Inside was his father's efficiency report on Colonel Dutton, the one that had started everything, the one that had made Webb a target for revenge. At the bottom, his father's words about legacy and integrity, about standing for truth even when standing alone. Webb pulled out a pen and a fresh piece of paper. He began writing a letter that would be filed with his official records, to be opened only if something happened to him. A letter to future soldiers who might face what he had faced. To whoever reads this, he wrote, "If you are reading it, then I am gone. But before I go, I want you to know something important. Being thrown away does not define you. How you fight back does. Integrity is worth any cost. Truth always wins in the long run. And standing alone for what is right is the only legacy that matters." He signed it, dated it, and sealed it in an envelope marked for his official file. Ranger jumped up on the couch beside him, curling into a ball against his leg. Webb turned on the television to a news channel, half watching, half thinking about the next day's class, about the young soldiers he would teach, about the difference he could make by refusing to let his experience be wasted. His phone buzzed again. A message in a group chat with Chun and Okonkwo. Just a photo, no caption needed. The three of them at the ceremony 6 months ago, standing together, medals on their chests, smiles on their faces. Brothers and sisters in arms. Not just by uniform, but by choice. By shared struggle. By the decision to stand for something bigger than themselves. Webb set down his phone and closed his eyes, Ranger's warm weight against his side, peace settling over him like a blanket. Ryan Dutton had thrown him away, thinking it would make him disappear. It had been the worst decision Dutton ever made, because Marcus Webb had not disappeared. He had returned stronger, angrier, more determined. And when the confrontation came, when truth finally faced corruption in the light where everyone could see, integrity had won. It always did eventually. You just had to be willing to fight for it. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character. Maybe you have witnessed similar courage in your own life, or know someone who refused to stay down when the world tried to throw them away. Share your thoughts. We love hearing from you. Webb opened his eyes and looked at Ranger, at the dog who had chosen him when no one else would. Tomorrow they would go back to the classroom, back to teaching young soldiers about more than shooting, back to making sure the next generation understood that being a soldier meant more than following orders. It meant having the courage to know when orders were wrong, the integrity to speak truth to power, the strength to stand alone if necessary, and the wisdom to understand that being thrown away was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of proving how badly they had miscalculated. Marcus Webb was home. He was whole. He was exactly where he was meant to be, and he was never going to let anyone forget what happens when you throw away a good soldier. It was, he thought with a smile, a very bad move indeed.